Modern linguistics operates on the premise that the relationship between a spoken sound and its meaning is entirely arbitrary. This rule was formalized by Ferdinand de Saussure, the architect of linguistic structuralism. This is Saussure's dyadic model. He defined the linguistic sign as a signifier, the sound image, and a signified, the mental concept. The dashed line between them indicates that their connection is a matter of cultural convention, not physical necessity. This assumption of randomness is the analytical standard used to study the major languages of the world today. Applying the arbitrary sign as a universal rule leaves modern linguists unable to account for a language built on its own specific phonetic physics. When scholars apply these Western structuralist models to the Arabic language, the analytical mechanics fail to engage with the material. Standard linguistic theories, including generative grammar, struggle to capture the actual semantic architecture of the Quran. Dr. Jamal Maghabla argues that the classical Arabic concept of bayan, or manifestation, rejects the assumption of an arbitrary sign. In its place, the tradition relies on linguistic intentionality. This is a system where sound, definition, and the reality being described are strictly interdependent. To understand how the Quranic text functions, we must examine the Arabic language through its phonetic physics. We can observe this intentionality by returning to the 10th century phonetic analysis of Ibn Jini. This cross-section shows the articulation of the Arabic root for bayan, the letters ba, ya, and nun. The physical movement required to produce these sounds mirrors the meaning of the word. The letter ba is a bilabial plosive. Air pressure builds behind the lips and bursts outward, physically acting out the concept of emergence from concealment. The medial ya, or alif, requires the vocal tract to open wide, creating a sustained sound wave that indicates movement and spatial extension. The sequence concludes with the letter nun. Airflow is diverted into the nasal cavity, creating an internal resonance that denotes stability and settling. This physiological sequence, an explosion, a spatial extension, and a final settling, literally performs the process of bringing a hidden truth into the open. In this framework, the sound of the word is a physiological map of its semantic reality. This phonetic logic scaled directly into the historical usage of the language. In pre-Islamic poetry, the root ba, ya, na was used to describe physical actions, to cut, to sever, or to separate a bond. Usage eventually shifted from the act of cutting to the spatial distance created by that cut. By the time the Quran was revealed, physical separation had evolved into a marker of cognitive distinction, the ability to separate truth from falsehood. The clarity defined by bayan is the logical endpoint of the physical act of separation. Semantic meaning in this ancient tradition is entirely driven by the physical, tangible physics of the phonetic root. Early Quranic scholarship treated bayan as an existential act of revelation, rather than a rhetorical flourish. This changed as Islamic scholars began translating and integrating Hellenistic philosophy. The integration of Greek thought introduced a new logical framework to the Arabic linguistic tradition. The Aristotelian organon forced fluid Arabic concepts into the rigid frameworks of formal logic. This massive collision completely severed the inherent link between the physical sound of the language and the absolute truth it described. Scholars like al-Jurjani and as-Sakaki later systematized the language using these Hellenistic categories. Bayan was downgraded from an existential truth to a set of rhetorical devices, categorized alongside metaphors and similes. This compartmentalization turned linguistic study into a mechanical classification of figures of speech. This intense rhetorical focus trapped the language in a rigid Aristotelian framework, obscuring its original phonetic and intentional structure. Modern Arab linguists continue to operate within this fragmented Hellenistic framework. The mismatch between Saussurean arbitrariness and the structural reality of the Arabic language makes modern linguistic analysis inconsistent. Attempting to fit the Quranic text into these Western models requires stripping away its most foundational property, intentionality. A theoretical toolkit built on the assumption of cultural arbitrariness cannot decode a text built on absolute phonetic intention. The philosopher Taha Abdurrahman proposed a return to the language's internal logic as a solution. This intentional linguistic paradigm respects the physics of the language, connecting physical resonance directly to semantic meaning. The phonetic derivation of the root bayan shows that meaning is a physical architecture within the language. Recognizing this intentionality allows scholars to re-evaluate translation and exegesis based on the actual mechanics of the Quranic text. Returning bayan to its intentional state aligns linguistic study with the internal logic of the Quranic revelation.